Today is December 2nd, 1997, and this is my third interview with Mr. Edwin Olmstead. Mr. Olmstead, we have your permission to tape this interview.
Oh, you bet.
Great. When we last left off, we were talking about your family and marriage and children. And as I recall, you came to Carlisle in 1947. Could you briefly tell us about your immediate family situation at the time you came to Carlisle?
Well, I don't know what you mean situation.
Children, job, wife, those types of things.
All right. Well, starting at the bottom of the age level, the youngest was 4 months old, and we brought her in a basket. And the next one was 2 years old, and the top one was 4 years old. All daughters. And, of course, a wife. Wife and job situation, I mentioned before that she was by inheritance to become a quarter owner of the mill if everything worked according to plan, which it didn't. And when they wanted somebody, I saw no choice at all. This was all we had in the world. Heaven knows we didn't have anything. My parents were poor as church mice, practically, and the only real asset we had in this world was the potential of whatever we could get on her interest in the mill. So I came. I saw no choice.
Why do you say it didn't work out in the beginning?
What do you mean? What didn't work out?
If all things went as planned.
Well, I'm not real happy about entering some of this in the record, but let's put it in and take it out. The mill was left through two generations. The elder generation were in trust, and the ultimate owners to be a brother and two sisters and a cousin. And one sister never showed any interest. The other one was married to me. The brother was severely handicapped, and the cousin was working for the mill, and I don't remember how long we worked together. We enjoyed each other. We still see each other and so on. There's nothing there, but he had an aptitude test sometime or other someplace, I don't know where. He'd worked for DuPont before he came here, saying that he was adept at research, and we weren't doing any research. So sometime, and he just had this lust for research, and he felt that he'd be happier to cut out and find a place where he could be involved in research. So he left us and was going to made an application to the Institute of Paper Chemistry, a potential doctorate candidate, and something happened there dissuaded him, and he joined a paper mill, another paper mill in Chillicothe, Ohio.
So you worked at the paper mill until 1972?
I did, yes.
And then went into retirement?
Yes.
Was there any particular reason for why you stopped working at the mill in 72?
Well, I'd had 25 years. Yeah, we had a personality conflict situation, and I could retire, was old enough that I could draw Social Security and pension, and so I decided to join the idle rich.
And so in retirement...
Basically, again, I don't know whether you wanted the record or not, but basically between you and me, I worked for a fellow that, about as nearly as I can look back, was paranoid. And
about what things do you think he was paranoid?
Well, there are two symptoms of paranoia. One is absolute demand for being in absolute control, controlling everything and everybody. And the other one is of knowing it all. One of the characteristics of paranoia, I think, is to feel threatened by any disagreement. This means that you got to know it all. I don't profess to be an expert on paranoia, but I've got an amazing number of them that have given me some perspective on them.
Like a fear of confrontation, do you think?
Yes. Well, let me give you an example. One in particular. On two separate occasions, with two different cars, gave me the lecture, "My daddy's car is better than your daddy's car." And this was in a great elaboration of, I won't endeavor to repeat, I couldn't repeat it verbatim, but a particular car he bought was absolutely the best model that that company had ever made, and it was just a wonderful thing, and so on. And then some number of years later, he got another car and the same thing. It didn't take a lot of discernment to conclude that this was not a discussion of the qualities of the automobile. This is a revelation that he can't face in his own mind, that he couldn't make a wrong decision. And I think that's paranoia.
So in 72, in retirement, you have taken an interest in the Civil War.
Narrower than that, really, just in Civil War, primarily in Civil War ordnance. The ordnance first, the war second.
Okay. And what types of things are you interested in, or do you write about?
Just specifically the ordnance, the cannon. The field is already so big that it's difficult to compress it. It's really too much to do. My second book, incidentally, the publisher says he'll have it by December 15th, and I'm spreading handbills to that effect. We hope he's right. It is a relatively complicated area, a relatively mixed up one, because of a number of things that are happening. War always seems to stimulate a lot of dormant and even innovative developments. In the Civil War, artillery did its full share of all. And they were working with several different materials and several different approaches, and so really, this is really trying to make sense of I've never really bothered to count, but somewhere around 200 different types of cannon, sizes and types. And one of the problems is that technology always seems to outrace language. And so there's a great confusion of names, and duplication of names, same things given a variety of names, many things, different things given the same names, and it's just confusing. And essentially, I've been trying to unscramble that as best I can, and even to be so presumptuous as to make some suggestions of what it really should be if you'd like to keep things straight. Maybe turn around and work with a system of nomenclature that is consistent and does properly describe, in my opinion.
And you do most of this research in Carlisle?
No. A great deal of it is in Carlisle. But as far as volume of material is concerned, the National Archives is also a prime source. But I don't do the research there. I go down there and find source material and get it on microfilm so that I can study it here. The time is spent here, not there. All I go there for is a scouting expedition, and then wind up with miles and miles of microfilm. And one little microfilm that can be found in minutes there can occupy days here.
Now, with your time spent here in Carlisle, generally Cumberland County, what types of changes, most notable changes, have you seen since the late 40s?
That's an awfully hard question, partly because I haven't been interested in that.
Okay. Any sorts of opinions about the county?
Well, I in general like it. In general like the decisions that are made by the officials at all levels. I have no quarrels with it. I do feel that it's a pity that downtown Carlisle couldn't have made use of alley space that really wasn't very efficiently used into making downtown Carlisle a place where you could reasonably find a place to park and continue to do business with established businesses there. I say that because where I lived in Cleveland, a place had done that. They hadn't bothered to build a new mall. They kept their existing and cleaned out behind, and there was a place to park. Convenient. I don't know whether the mall is here to stay or whether malls are here to stay or not. They certainly have problems. You walk in either one and look at the number of unoccupied places and listen to the excitement of buyouts and chase-outs and do that sort of thing, and you wonder just how stable they are and if they're really that good of an idea.
So politically, you're rather satisfied with the proceedings?
Yeah.
What about, say, culturally or socially? Do you have any complaints or disagreements?
No, none at all. I've enjoyed the various civic programs available. I was active for years in the Cumberland County Historical Society. I'm very much pleased by the War College's perspectives. Well, actually, it's the Military History Institute's perspective series of lectures. I think I've attended every one they've had while I was in town for about 25 years, and in general enjoyed them. I do sort of like the convenience. I've also been active in the Civil War Roundtable for that period of time, which is really a West Shore operation more than Carlisle, but I kind of appreciate being a place that's small enough so that it isn't a 2-hour drive to get any place to see something. The big cities, gee whiz, the amount of time you can spend getting wherever you want to go in any of the biggest cities.
I can understand that. Now, I know a lot can be said for the children and younger adults of Carlisle. Do you have any sort of opinion about the trend or the type of kids and younger adults that are in Carlisle?
I have no sensitivity in that field at all. While I was very upset when the schools were merging in Boiling Springs, apparently a reasonably small group of people kept it from merging with Carlisle, and we didn't care for the type of education that was available. Well, we preferred what was available in Carlisle to what wasn't, so our first daughter went as a tuition student to Carlisle. Our second one wanted to stay in Boiling Springs, and my wife was sort of, when she didn't have her hands full taking care of the children, a little footloose, and went back into teaching, so my third one went to Harrisburg Academy. Actually, Carlisle and Harrisburg Academy were both far more geared at that time toward advanced education than Boiling Springs seemed to be. We never regretted the two removals. We sorely regretted that Boiling Springs did not join Carlisle.
Now, what about your typical family life since the 1940s in terms of marriage and the kids in Carlisle? What would be your opinion about that? Satisfied with your children growing up in Carlisle?
Oh, very much so. We always had fun. One of the things I treasure most about my wife is that we had a good laugh almost every day we were married. She had an enormous sense of humor, and we just, there are a lot of things we enjoyed. One of our particular joys was, as you can see, record collections. And we all we wound up with a number of records of British humor and that sort of thing, Flanders and Swan and so on, and in Flanders, and each time we get a new Flanders and Swan record or something like it, or Stanley Holloway. It was kind of fun catching all the words and working out. In fact, I think the kids pretty much have those records memorized, and we just had a lot of fun in the family. Ruth was a skilled pianist and had a piano. All the kids had instruments. We used to have, we even had our own in-house orchestra of sorts that produced a great deal of humor and enjoyment. I cannot really imagine a happier married life than we had.
Now, in terms of the paper mill in Carlisle, what would be your opinion of the other businesses back then, with your 25 years at the paper mill, and now in Carlisle? The relationships that your paper mill had with other businesses and such?
Well, actually, we didn't have remember the paper mill was in Holly, and although we participated with the Chamber of Commerce and so on, we didn't have a very intimate relationship. Practically everybody in Carlisle was producing I'll call household goods. The shoe factories are still in business. The garment factories are still in business. Maslin was producing home-consuming carpets as well as other things. Carlisle Tire was on bicycle tires and automobile tubes and all this relatively close to consumer market. Our business was quite remote. Our business was in our laboratory business was in the chemical laboratories, institutions and universities, and quite remote from Carlisle. Our industrial business was in foods, beverages, chemicals, that sort of thing, which were very remote from Carlisle. And our channels of trade, our approach, our services, and all the rest were quite different from anybody else I knew in Carlisle. Basically, it's just a problem. We didn't have much common community of interest.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, our relationship with our customers was quite different than our channels of distribution were different. I don't know of anybody with a parallel system of channels of distribution such as we had. And of course, at the same time, our location was such that our employment were almost entirely south of Holly. Places were Aspers, York Springs, mostly farm people, most of whom had been brought up on farm, taught resourcefulness. Whatever needed to be done, they did. I felt we had the best labor. I felt our labor group was our biggest asset. Just extremely versatile and I had no way of knowing to what extent they paralleled the Carlisle labor group. I admit that maybe I somewhat isolated myself. We had so many challenges that just needed attention, and I concentrated on those far more than I did what was going on elsewhere in the county.
Would you say that when you came here in 1947 that Carlisle was generally populated by people such as yourself, middle to upper working class citizens?
I don't like these generalities. I don't really have a way to know. I don't know how many of that, how many were retired farmers. I don't know what I don't visualize anything that would be constructive as an overview.
What would your opinion be of Carlisle now in terms of politics, economics, those types of things?
Well, again, this is a difficult question. This really, I get along with it. It works. I'm not a political scientist. I'm not used to analyzing that sort of thing.
Fair enough.
And the biggest bad decision, in my opinion, was the school business of not getting in the jointure.
Do you think it was common for other Americans, not just here in Carlisle, but to be living a life such as yours? You know, that it was profitable, industrious, raising a family. Would you say that was typical? You're just following a trend?
Oh, golly. Again, I don't like these questions quite that steeply. I don't even need to know the field that studies this. This isn't quite political science, but I'm sure there is a field, and most of the people I knew were raising families of various sizes as best they could and shipping off to school as best they could, or helping them get started in business or anything else, just raise the little birds and kick them out of the nest.
What about the post-war boom, say from 1946 to when you retired from the mill? What was that like? Did you experience any of it? Did you feel the effects?
Well, I keep coming back by saying it may be just an alibi. Maybe I'm covering my own deficiencies, but we made enormous changes in our mill during that period of time, and a great deal of my effort went into planning and executing and our own problems. Had problems enough of my own without bothering anybody else's. When I came here, the fire insurers were not really in love with us. There were 11 penalty items against our insurance. I wish to goodness I had ever priced those out. I have a suspicion the penalties cost us more than the insurance did. And some insurers wouldn't even talk to us when we tried to better our rates, and one in particular declared that he wished not to renew, and these were problems that I chose to face and try to do something about, and did. To me, having burned to the ground was a pretty horrible experience, even though I wasn't involved, and I was determined that it wasn't, if I had anything to do with it, it wasn't going to happen. I was going to do everything possible to see to it that it didn't happen again. And of course, the same thing for safety. I felt the same way about it. We were asking people for a fair day's work. We didn't see any point in having them get hurt, maimed, crippled, or killed. And there again, here was an area where nobody considers it competitive for the industry to, or I say collusion for the industry to share. I found that various industry organizations were extremely helpful in helping us face problems that we didn't know quite what the best solution was. There are several bits of machinery, for example. Ours were terribly out of date, but through our industry association, I found that other people had equally out-of-date stuff that they'd found out how to add equipment to make them safe by today's standards without starting with all new equipment that would be made that way. And we applied that sort of thing. That's pretty vague, but there were machines that almost made your hair stand in to watch the operator do it, where it just looked like he was in constant danger of removing a finger or a hand or an arm. And the industry association acquainted us with a method of what's called two-hand control, where the man's both hands had to be out of the operating field before the machine would run. That's the sort of thing that gives me peace of mind to watch an operation.
In your opinion, what was the experience of the post-war boom for Carlisle? Or would you not be aware of it?
Not really aware of it. We all were surviving and growing our business or finding a new niche or something like that. Again, I was busy enough in my problems right at the mill without worrying too much about what was going on around me. Maybe I wasn't that nosy, I don't know.
So to wrap up, you would say that your experience in Carlisle has been very enjoyable.
Yeah, no question of it.
Okay. Well, Mr. Olmstead, thank you very much for allowing me to interview you. I appreciate it.
You mean that's all you have?
I think we're done.
Sorry, haven't bothered myself with a broad overview as your questions seem to indicate you'd like, but
I think we have ample information.
I was down on the bottom of my own little trench digging as hard as I could, and I wasn't much bothered with what was going on around.
Well, I thank you for what you've given me.
I should say that, well, yes, there were occasions that in all sorts of ways I became acquainted with my various neighbors around, and I was never treated better in my life than I did when I went to another manufacturer with a problem. They're just outstanding people that knew all about helpfulness.
And that was while you were working at the mill?
Yeah, yeah.
And what about nowadays?
Well, I don't have many of that kind of problem. My problems today are usually finding things far away, and
but in terms of the helpfulness of the people,
no, always
have been accommodating.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing that I like about living here. I have never been in a community. Well, there's a lot of commonality. We're all pretty much in the same boat. And I've never made a place where just everybody is quite so congenial as they are here. They're just delightful people. I'm glad to know them and look forward to knowing them better.
Great. Well, that would attribute to your overall good experiences here in Carlisle, then.
Yeah.
Great. Well, again, I thank you very much for your time. It's been very helpful.
Gee, you let me off easy.